Welcome to the Transmission Coaching Podcast, powered by ATRA. Today's podcast is sponsored by Gers Magazine, your magazine for the automatic transmission rebuilding industry. Be sure to get into Gers. Get your free subscription at gersmagazine.com. Click on subscribe. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the Coaching Podcast. And now here's your host, Coach Lance Wiggins.
Welcome to the Transmission Coaching Podcast. It's a great day to fix transmissions. My name is Lance Wiggins, and with me here today is my co-host, back again, Vanessa Velasquez. And
where was I?
Let's get this straight. So last week when I did the podcast and she wasn't here, I mentioned that she was on vacation with her daughter who just graduated.
You said I was at my fifth grade daughter's
fifth
graduation.
grade. Yeah, my bad. She's only in second grade. It wasn't even a graduation. It was simply just a vacation. So I missed you. I missed you so much. That's why.
That feels good.
I was sitting here. I was all alone. I didn't know what to talk about, and you were gone. And I was like, "What am I going to do?"
I think you did okay, though.
Yeah, we did okay. It was
don't get used to it.
It was an education to the industry podcast, and it went real well. So this week I had the pleasure of talking with Nick and with Irvin Gers over at Raybestos Powertrain a couple weeks ago. We had emailed each other back and forth, and I know Raybestos is a huge sponsor for us at the Expo. Tell us a little bit about what they do, Vanessa, at the Expo for us real quick.
So Raybestos plays a big part in the success of our annual Expo. They are our sponsor for the luncheon, which is held on Friday, right before the ribbon cutting, going into the trade show floor. So they help sponsor the event, which basically allows us to do the event, 2-hour-long luncheon with entertainment, of course, food, and Raybestos always has some exciting news or a video to show during that time as well. So we really, really appreciate everything they've done, not only for Expo, but for ATRA, really.
So that's kind of the marketing side of it for Raybestos Powertrain. And when I was talking with Irv last a couple weeks ago, we were kind of shooting back and forth some ideas, and he had some really interesting things to talk about. So we decided that today would be a great time
first phone call.
to get that phone call rolling. So we dialed up Irv, and I believe we have Irvin Gers, who is our sales and product development support engineer with Raybestos Powertrain. Welcome, Irv.
Thank you, Lance. I appreciate you inviting me to this. I was overhearing what you were saying to Vanessa about her being absent. Apparently she was absent for so long that her child ended up graduating a couple of grades.
Yeah, 3 years just flew by. I was like, whoa, I'm having a hard enough time that she's going into third grade,
You know, Irv, I've got 6 kids between Kelly and I, and so we're actually counting down the grades now. So we're down to 2 left in high school, and move in that direction. So as fast as I can get them through, maybe I'm just trying to work a little hard at getting that handled. I don't know.
And then
you're getting a little pushy there, aren't you?
Even with everybody else's kids.
I know. Whoa, hold on, Lance. We're not there yet. Yeah. Exactly.
Oh. So for a lot of our listeners, they might not know that you and I actually worked together for a brief period of time when I first started with ATRA back in 1999. And so for those that don't know about Irvin Gers, Irv, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do with Raybestos?
Well, let's see. Where do I start? I got into the transmission business, industry, I should say, back in the mid to late 70s, and I spent probably about 17 years actually doing work on transmissions in the shop environment. And one day I saw an ad in the back of the Gers magazine, which wasn't very old at the time, and it looked like they were looking for technicians. And I kind of mentioned it out loud to my wife at the time, and she kind of pushed me a little bit forward to go ahead and send in a resume. I did it. I never really thought that I would get called on, but I did. And so that's how I ended up at ATRA.
And who was it that called you, or was it Dennis?
As a matter of fact, it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's when he was doing the job that Lance is doing.
Yes.
he's
So-
he's not as gray as I am now when he was my age. I can tell you that.
I wasn't as gray either. But after I spent some time at ATRA, met a lot of wonderful people, talked to a lot of wonderful people on the phone, did some seminars, did some what do you call it, the bulletins, and wrote some articles and stuff like that. I ended up moving eastward, and eventually I settled in here at Raybestos. I've been here for about 14 years now.
Wow.
And your title says Raybestos Sales and Product Development Support Engineer, but I'm pretty sure you can probably add producer, actor, technical presenter. Tell us a little bit about the training videos that you're in charge of. I happen to get online and check them out. I'm like, look at you, man. You're just
Nice.
making it happen. I like that.
Well, that was something that we had been considering for a long time, and one of the ideas I had was I was actually supposed to be going to Moscow to do a seminar, and we wanted something different than what we had done in the past. And so I had thought about maybe doing a teardown video to introduce people to one of the ZF 8-speeds. And so we weren't really sure what we were doing at the time when we started that. So I figured the best way to handle that would be let's just film the thing. Let's just take it apart like a guy would take it apart in a shop for the very first time, with very little knowledge about what was going on, and let's see what we could, come up with out of that. And so, in a way, that was very exciting. And then, because of some of the background noises and things that were going on, and we didn't have a very good audio system at the time, I think I ended up going back in and doing some audio, over the top of some of the video that we did.
Some voiceovers.
That was our very first, jump into the video world, and it was a lot of fun too.
Well, I think it's interesting because I remember in 2006, I guess we did some video on the 6R60 powertrain or the Power Flow. With the Le Peltier gear train that we were introducing at the seminars. And I remember looking at the videos that we shot, and then in comparison to the videos that we shoot now, boy, it was like 12 DPI compared to 300 DPI. It's
And you're so proud of them at the time.
Yeah.
There's going to be a time where
Yeah.
in the future where we'll look back at what we were doing today and thinking the same thing. That's kind of crazy.
So do you guys have...
what's interesting about doing that kind of work is that, that was the very first video that Nick and I shot, and because this was a program that I was also going to be taking to Russia with me, I was very particular on how I wanted it to look. And so Nick and I actually sat down, and he did the editing, but I was kind of like sitting on his shoulder going, no, a little bit more, no, a little bit less. I was doing that kind of stuff. And so I think both of us are probably very proud of that one, the way it turned out, just because we were so, into making this thing as good as we could. But yet I still look back and I can notice some things that I would have done differently. I don't know if Nick does. But I guess that's something that no matter how much heart you put into something, you'll probably always find something that you think back in your mind, yeah, maybe I should have done that a little bit different. But I think it turned out great.
That's pretty atypical. You build a house and you're the only one that knows that one tile. That one tile over there in the bathroom is just enough, just loose enough. You're the only one that knows that. Everybody else. So,
or that one nail somewhere in the wall where you went to hang a picture and you're nailing a nail into a nail.
That's right. Thank.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned some training in Russia, in the Moscow area. Do you guys do a lot of international training?
We have in the past. I've been to China a couple of times for various reasons. I've been to Moscow 4, 5, maybe 6 times, something like that. And I've also I was in Amsterdam for a meet and greet thing there at the I forget what they call that show there. It was a wonderful show too. I've been invited to some other places, but I had some hang-ups with my passport and visa, so I didn't quite make those ones. But I think I've gotten that straightened out now.
I think the one in Amsterdam is Automechanica, the Raytech.
Yeah, it's the Rematech.
Rematech, that's it. Yeah, Rematech.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dennis was at that one. He was also at the one in Dubai as well.
Yeah, no, I haven't made it that far yet.
That's a truck, man. What's it like doing? The only locations that I've done have been Europe, where we're primarily English speaking. What's it like doing a show in Moscow when English is not the first language? How do you go about doing that? I'm curious.
Well, what we do at that point in time is we find someone who is very fluent in both English and Russian, and then I have to be cognizant of the fact that whatever program I put together is going to take twice as long to do it, because I'm going to put something up on the screen, I'm going to say something, and then my translator is going to say the same thing but in a different language.
Got it.
And so I think the very first time that I went there, I was actually doing someone else's program. They at the last minute had to dismiss themselves from going, but we were still obligated to go, so I got volunteered. And
lucky.
You want to talk about performing miracles? I think I had about 4 days to get my passport with a visa in it, and that's a whole nother story in itself. If you want to hear about it sometime, I'll tell you. But
been there, buddy. Been there, done that.
Yeah, we performed a miracle, because getting a visa to go out of the country normally takes a little bit longer than 4 days, but everything just happened to line up right. I ended up flying into New York. I got my passport at the passport and visa place, and then within a couple hours, I'm back at JFK, and I'm flying to Moscow.
Man.
Wow.
If I did not get my visa at that point in time there...
You were going home.
That would not have worked out too well.
Yeah.
Oh, you'd be stuck in New York. One of the two.
Yeah, something like that. And I think I ended up landing in Moscow somewhere around 12 o'clock, and I was supposed to go on at 3:15.
Oh, my gosh.
Fortunately, their scheduling was a little bit looser than that, so I didn't really go on until about 6. But also, I hadn't slept the whole flight.
That's usually what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I went to Europe, we left here at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the Pacific Coast, flew all the way to Europe, got there at like noon, didn't sleep a wink on the plane, stayed up until 8 o'clock that night, fell asleep, got up the next morning, did my show. Interestingly enough, I felt great until about 2 o'clock, and then that was it, man. I could barely keep my head up.
The wall.
Oh, the wall was crazy. When we were talking last week, you mentioned something about how you relate the technical aspect to your sales team. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. One of the job functions that I was hired in for was because I was more or less very knowledgeable about the inner workings of the transmission, and I understood a lot of the more technical terms than what our salespeople do. One of the things that they asked me to do was to maybe get some technical data from the engineering team and see if I could put that in more of a layman's English for them, so that they'd have a better understanding of what all of this technical jargon was supposed to mean, and that way it helped them to better talk about our product and hopefully sell it at the same time.
Almost like you're the walking type dictionary, right? Like you're the Irvipedia.
It's something like that, or if nothing else, I was the translator this time instead of me needing a translator for something else.
The middleman.
Yeah, and that's something. We also talked about, which I felt was very intriguing because, you know, in our world at the Automatic Transmission Rebuilders Association, in our world, we deal with this a lot. And one of the things you mentioned was something about information not being backed up with data, and you know, doing things that were old school but don't really kind of relate to today's technology with clutches and types of clutches. I'd like you to kind of expound on that, and we can, you know, kind of go back and forth with some of the things that you're finding or some of the concerns that you have, and maybe help teach our listeners a little bit about what some things are acceptable but others really aren't, and really having the data behind it.
Well, where do I begin?
I know this. You were excited about this too, so I'm give you the floor.
I recall that, and that was 2 weeks ago.
A lot has happened.
Now, actually, one of the things I think that I was mentioning was, you know, we put out product that's designed for a specific purpose, and I'm sure there's other manufacturers that do the same thing. And sometimes what'll happen is somebody will get an idea that, well, that sounds like that'll work in this other area. As a for instance, if you don't mind me mentioning any of our product name, we have a product called a Z-Pack.
Mm-hmm.
And that technology was actually developed in the earlier 2000s. And we first released the Z-Pack for the 4L60, I think back in somewhere around 2003, 2004, something like that. That was right at the time that I was actually, starting to work here.
Mm-hmm.
And the primary focus of that was to fix a problem with hot spotting on the steel plates, which was, that transmission since 1982, when it was a 700R4, was notorious for burning up that clutch. And there are a lot of issues in that transmission that help promote that. Some of it's line pressure rise, some of it's internal leaks, and this and that. And so there was a lot of fixes going on during those times. Some guys were saying throw the load springs out. Some guys were saying, no, you got to leave them in. You got to drill this hole, or you got to put this product in there. And so people were just, I think, going into overdrive, trying to, no pun intended, of course. They were going into overdrive trying to, figure out how to fix this thing. And I've seen where they've actually tightened the clutches up to the point of almost having a clutch drag, which creates parasitic drag, which is not good for fuel economy, and it's not good for the internal components, because that also then creates heat.
Right.
Which is one of the things we want to get rid of in that clutch. So the hot spotting was an issue that we were looking at very, very closely. And one of the things that we have here is we have a lab that we can manufacture different things. I mean, we actually can, for instance, for our clutch plates and for our torque converter line, we can actually design our own adhesives. We actually design and develop our own resins for saturation of our materials and stuff like that. And we have dynos that we can run a clutch setup on, so that we can see, what's going on. So we started at the very beginning. We took a stock setup, and we ran our normal SAE tests on it. And we were benchmarking to see how does that thing perform? What's it look like? So now, if we want to make a change in something, we can have all of the data to back up what we did. And eventually, we ended up with what was called a Z-Pack, which is a single-sided clutch design. But it's more than that. It also changes the loading factor on that clutch. And so between that and the material that we chose for that actually allowed us to put a single-sided clutch pack in a clutch pack that normally It doesn't take a lot of abuse, and it lived, and it survived, and it did not cone. So that was kind of like the backstory on that. And then, because it was working so well, there's guys in performance-minded, business that thought that they would try that. And, what's interesting is that it does work in some performance applications, but there's a lot of performance applications that it may not work so well, which is okay because we didn't design it for performance. We designed it for the guy that's got
longevity.
We designed it for longevity. We designed it for the guy who's got a truck that maybe he uses it in construction. He's got a big bed of tools and other stuff on the back of it, and he's driving out to a work site, 4x4s, and not the kind with 36-inch tires and the blower and the nitrous and all that under the hood either.
You designed it for the working man.
Yeah.
Right. Essentially.
Right. And so, and then we sometimes with social media, people are very quick to give their opinion on something.
No. No, that's
you
not
never
true.
Experienced that? I've
That's
only
not
experienced
true.
it a few times.
That's not true.
No, I've only experienced that a few times where somebody actually got on there and started. I don't want to say they started ranting, but they weren't talking very kindly of the Z-Pack, and I'm not really sure if they were talking about it with any particular data behind them or what it was, but I guess basically the whole point of this is that product wasn't designed as a high-performance product, and people used it in a high-performance, application. Now, I'm not saying it won't work in that kind of an application, but at some point in time, there's going to be a limitation on what that product can do. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we actually have materials that we designed specifically for that. We've got stage ones for the street tuners, and we've got our blue plates that are actually meant for the guys who are towing their vehicles to the track to go drag racing.
I heard a statement a while back because we were having this conversation about interchange, and
Mm-hmm.
and you hear this. Well, I did the interchange and it works just fine, and I said by accident. It's not meant to be. That interchange is not meant to be. I'm telling you, it's by accident. And after calling and talking to several other guys that, Mark Puccinelli was one of them, he said the same thing. He goes, Lance, I'm telling you, it works, but it's by accident. It's not supposed to work. And after we went through the whole process of defining, what was between the two interchanges, I think Dennis just wrote about it in Gers that'll be coming out here soon, where it's it's an update, but it's not. It's an update. And it happens to be with GM 60/40 stuff, 60/75, but GM was very notorious about this, and I'm sure you guys have dealt with this with your parts where they do an interim change in something. So they build something in like halfway through a year. So half of the transmissions have, like the ISS and the Stator Sport. Half of them had a plug where there was nothing. Half of them had the ISS but no actual teeth on the input shaft. The other half, it was all said and done. And so you get these transmissions that they look like they were half built, right? And you're trying to get parts for them, and they call the parts companies to get these, and then they give them something. No, this doesn't look like the one I had in there, or no, that'll work. It's an updated part for it. And what ends up happening is you end up creating problems. And just like you're mentioning here with the Z-Pack and the social media, I find that the majority of the people that want to brand a company or a part or something as a failed component usually either A, don't install it right, or B, don't know what they're doing. And so just because it fits doesn't mean that it works, right? I mean, that's the
Sure.
data that you're talking about, the subsequent data that you're talking about where, you have put it on your dyno. You've put the horsepower to. You've dragged the clutches. You've done everything that you possibly could do to determine what that load is, and then deliver it to the big picture. And then from there, the people that want to build, race cars out of this, they should probably be looking to do something else other than that, because halfway down the drag strip, that's probably going to grenade. Just going to throw it out there.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when you start talking about the high performance stuff, people just coming up with their own recipes. That's exactly the kind of stuff that we deal with, regarding, well, what's the best material to put in something? Well, that's a very loaded question, and I don't know that there's really a true answer for it. It's kind of like, there's a very popular torque converter guy on social media right now, and he one time we had got somebody here that wanted I think it was a 3,000 stall converter for a side project that they were working on, and so they wanted me to contact somebody and get him the 3,000 stall converter. Well, I know this guy, kind of very well. I met him through one of our other employees, and so I called up over there, and I just asked him if he could provide me with a 3,000 stall converter, and he, being smart enough and having gone down that road before, he wanted me to fill out a questionnaire.
Yeah.
And the questionnaire was, okay, what's the weight of the vehicle? What's the size of the tires? What's the rear end ratio? What's the size of the engine? What kind of camera you got in there? I mean, he wanted to know exactly how that vehicle was put together, so he could recommend what kind of torque converter that should go in there, not what the guy wanted.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so when a guy asked me, well, what kind of friction material should he put in his transmission, I'd like to use the analogy. We have some product that's made for different applications, but that doesn't mean always that it's going to work perfectly for you in the application that you're building. And there's no recipe for this. There's no cookbook for these things. And so the analogy that I like to use is, I could take 20 different chefs from different areas of the country. I could give them the Betty Crocker cookbook and tell them, go make that recipe on page 286.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you're going to get at least, at least 20, maybe 19 that are going to be different.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Sure, by one stretch or another.
It's fascinating, and it's kind of troublesome at the same time,
So I noticed in one of your videos that you had some sort of adhesive that you used just to put the clutch onto the clutch plate, just as a holding mechanism. You called it MET, I think. Is that what it's called?
No, I think I know what you're talking about. In the video, what that was is that was one of the torque converter bonding videos that I did.
Correct. That's it.
We coat our rings with a adhesive, and it's not fully cured when the end user gets it. It's in a stage where it's not sticky or tacky or anything, but it hasn't fully cured yet. So the idea is that you take this ring and you put it onto your assembly in the, whether it's the damper assembly, the piston assembly, inside the torque converter, and you put that whole assembly into a bonding or a bonder, and it goes through a bonding cycle. And during that cycle, it's going to heat up to whatever temperature that you've figured that it's going to. And then once that adhesive hits a certain temperature, which is usually 350 degrees, that's the time that it starts to flow and cure. So then you have to leave it in for a certain amount of time. Well, moving it from your workbench or your work area into the bonder, can cause that ring to float around or fall off, or if a fan's going in your shop because it's too warm, the fan might just blow it up in the air, and so now you have a little trouble keeping that thing in place. So what we recommended in the video was to use it's a chemical called MEK.
MEK.
Methyl ethyl ketone, I think, is the correct name for that acronym. And what that does is that kind of softens up that uncured adhesive and allows it to get tacky so that you can then put the ring down on your assembly and hold it there for a few seconds. And then it's kind of, I'm not going to say it's glued there, but it'll stay in place. So now you can safely move your assembly into the bonder and not worry about it flying off or falling off or getting out of place.
That is, I just find that fascinating. Part stuff is pretty cool. Part stuff is pretty cool. So if you can share with us, I know that a lot of companies, what you guys do is somewhat secretive, but you guys got anything new coming down the pike, something you're working on that you can share with our listeners?
Oh, let's see here.
He's pulling out his magic book of special. Nope, not that one.
Yeah.
Nope, not that one. Oh,
let me see what I got here. Nope, that one. We are a couple of things that are going on right now. Back after we created our GPZ line of frictions, we started creating friction modules that had the GPZ double-sided frictions in them, and somehow or another those ended up being called torque kits. And then we actually developed some torque kits, and the torque kits are a little bit more than just a friction module. They contain some, in some cases, special thickness friction plates, along with some steel plates and maybe some other components. And those are actually designed to help increase the torque capacity of the clutch, which is far more beyond than what our Z-Pack design does. So we're working on those for a lot of different applications, but what I wanted to clarify here is that some of those friction modules that were just GPZ frictions, and there may also be a mix of some other friction material in there, like our stage 1 material, because that's a good street performing material, and it's also not necessary to use the GPZ in every application, and that's another discussion that we could probably have some learning with. So the stage 1 material would replace just the stock can materials, like for low reverse clutch or a coast clutch, or reverse only, something like that.
Right.
And so I'm going through right now, and I'm actually in the process of relabeling just the friction modules to like a GPZ module instead of calling it a torque kit, because I don't want people to get involved in thinking that they're going to get something really, really, really special when they only got something that was really special.
Got it.
So our torque
What is it,
kits
under promise and over
matter of fact,
deliver?
I think we've already released a couple of the new numbers, and those numbers are going to start with RTQ, which R normally, usually, always will stand for Raybestos, and then TQ would be short for torque kit, and then the RGPZ would naturally be for the GPZ friction modules.
Nice. Yeah, what did you say, Vanessa?
Under promise and over deliver.
Yeah, right. You talk about really, really, really special compared to just really special. I remember when I was 14, and Grandma was going to get us a VCR, and how excited we were about it. And there was that one box under the Christmas tree, and it was heavy. And my brother's like, "That's it, man. That's the VCR." And we had went and got videos that we can sit and watch, and we got that, and that we made that the last present. We opened it up, and it was a box of Knott's Berry jelly.
Oh my!
So that would be over promise and under deliver.
it was not the VCR, man. We just sat there going,
But you could still enjoy the jelly.
oh, we did. Yeah, we did. That was funny.
Oh.
Hey, so I've got a little game for our listeners, Irv. So don't say anything. But if you guys can remember what Irv's tagline was when he wrote for Gears Magazine, hit subscribe and let us know in the comments. And the first one to do that, I got something special I'll send out to you. I think that'll be pretty
Nice.
cool. Irv, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for being on here. Nick, if you're still out there, thank you for allowing us to give you guys a call and talk to you a little bit. I think this went very well.
Yeah, it was great.
Well, thank you so much. I had a good time. I hope our listeners did too.
Well, I think anytime we can talk tech, it's a good day, right?
Yeah, we can even do that, behind the scenes at Expo this year when we get there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Plenty
we
of time for that.
Yeah, we talked about having a podcast booth. I haven't talked to my engineer Chris yet, but he's excited about going to
This is
Vegas.
news to me.
He just smiled. So Vegas, maybe. I think we can make that happen. So that'll be good. All right, guys. So thank you so much for being here. It's a great day to fix transmissions. So let's keep fixing transmissions together. Until next time, thank you.